This bill does.
Todd McClay.
The last speaker in the debate right now, David Cunliffe, said a reasonable person, when presented with new information, would change his mind. It reminded me of seeing Mr Cunliffe on television last night. You know who it was that said that? It was his leader, David Shearer. But would Mr Cunliffe on TV3 News last night stand up and back his leader and say that he supported him and agreed with him? Not at all. When presented with new information, he didn't change his mind. He scurried back to the same place. All those plotting against the leaders on the Labor side scurry too. You see, the problem we have, Mr Speaker, and I rise to oppose this legislation, is that whilst Labor, the Greens and New Zealand First are trying to talk down our economy and promote money printing and more taxes, this national government's getting on with the job of responsibly managing the country's finances, helping build a more competitive economy and a more productive economy. Now, Mr Cunliffe said investment, growth and jobs. That's what they're all about. Well, guess what? The economy grew by 2.6% over the last year, one of the fastest rates of growth in the OECD in that period of time. And that's growth. Labor would love to get rid of that. The opposition parties don't like hearing this, but the simple facts are 2.6% growth. Interest rates are the lowest, and inflation the lowest have been for some time. A family with a $200,000 mortgage is now saving $200 a week in interest costs alone, compared to 2008 when we came into government. The opposition parties want to sweep that aside and have got all sorts of new ideas about how we fix some of these problems. Now, Mr Parker said earlier that 30 years of policy to keep inflation low has been working. Now he wants to chuck it out so inflation rates will go up again. He liked it for 30 years, but now in opposition changed his mind, doesn't want it anymore. We heard about growth in jobs. Well, Mr Speaker, here's the cold hard facts. New jobs are being created in New Zealand. Almost 60,000 more New Zealanders now have jobs than 2 years ago, and our manufacturing sector is actually growing. What did we see last weekend? A rushed summit of political parties from the opposition, some of their friends in the union movement, come in to fill a few seats, more seats empty than they were filled in that meeting. A crisis we had in manufacturing. Haven't heard anything about this week, have we, after that? Not one question in the House. In fact, the first question in the House about jobs and growth in jobs came from the government to our minister. Our public finances are improving. The deficit has halved over the last past year, so we can return to surplus sooner, something that the opposition party, the Labor Party, have already all of a sudden adopted. Yes, they want to get back to a surplus now as well. The bill before us would put these things at rest. It would send inflation and interest rates soaring, and there's absolutely no reason for it. And as for the latest idea from our opponents, the Greens, who seem to be leading the opposition on the other side of the House, printing money can only be described as wacky. So what would this mean? Let's think about a year or two from now if New Zealanders were unfortunate enough to have a change of government. It would see the Greens printing money, Labor printing money, spending money, and Winston denying any knowledge on it, and good on him for that. If I was him, I'd keep well away from those other lot as well. You see, if printing money was a way to fix problems in an economy, I say to the Greens, photocopying carbon credits is going to fix climate change as well. It's absolutely wacky. Now, our economy is not in crisis. Mr Parker raised the example of a couple of countries in the world. And let's look at those. Let's look at a couple of these examples. Japan and Switzerland. The Reserve Bank published a paper earlier this year which looked at intervention by the banks of Japan and Switzerland in the relevance of that to New Zealand. It noted that the currency intervention in 2008 have largely resulted in financial losses for both the Swiss National Bank and the Bank of Japan, and they have been ineffective in lowering their currencies. Since 2008, the Swiss franc has actually appreciated by 27% against the euro and 15% against the US dollar. And since 2008, the Japanese yen has appreciated 29% against the US dollar and 37% against the European currency. Mr Speaker, thank goodness we have a national government that's focusing on what's important. Thank goodness we're working hard under disciplined conditions to get this economy back on track. And thank goodness we're not supporting this legislation because the cost to New Zealanders through inflation that would run away and higher interest rates would be devastating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I call the honourable member Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.